So I say so a lot. I'm trying to think of how to start these things correctly. The last video was about more sources to find, and they weren't the only other sources I could find. I've actually got multiple sources. I just thought these were major sources you should know about. And one of them came up just because I was trying to do research on something. I was like, fine, I'll show you this. And another one I was like, oh, you know, I should I should show you this. It gets, you should be scared of that source because it can get you into some trouble, but it's a good source. But today we are going to talk about more timelines and more things that I should have added to some of the timelines, and you can kind of see the idea already. I just missed some things I should have done and I didn't, and now it bothers me a little. So today we're going to do more timelines. The first one we're going to do is shooting. And shooting games are older than the electromechanical systems that we have. They're actually older than gunpowder. We would have shooting competitions in little machines that let you shoot back in the Greek era. So it would be difficult to go and say, oh, this is when it began. It goes way back in the early arcade days, not the days of arcade as we understand it, but in the malls that were called arcades. We had these things where you'd walk into a room and you'd have a shooting gallery, and that was a common thing. They just decided to open it up into these malls. Eventually, they started to figure out, maybe we should make some devices, maybe we should do some stuff. The first ones were shooting pellets or kind of something else. Shooting pellets, usually. And it was just an air-compressed pellet. The sharpshooter right there is an air-compressed marble being shot. Then they got into the idea that maybe if you just held the gun in a certain position, it would connect these two wires, we'll say it that, and if these two wires were connected, well, then it shoots over here. And the game being played by the woman with the red hair is actually showing that game really well, that concept. If she raises up her gun, it shoots a little bit higher because she's connecting those wires. And then if she lowers it down or moves to the left or the right, it changes the wires so that she's shooting in the direction she wants. And it's not perfectly accurate, but it does the job, and you're not actually shooting anything. That's the concept. A little while later, into the 30s and 40s, we have the Sebring and other guns, where you would pull the trigger and this little flash would appear onto a little receptor on your gun. And the first one was actually electromechanical, and not a joke. You would pull the trigger and it would flash, and if the flash was a connection into the gun, then your little target would move the other way or do something like that. And they were called the Sebring Shooting Gallery. My grandfather, it turns out, really liked those games, and he played them all the time as a kid, and he would actually play them whenever he got the chance when my mom was growing up. So that should give you an idea of how old some of these ideas are. In fact, the company that made it was actually a vacuum company. Sebring Vacuum Company. Really? Well, the idea of the flash went on, and they would make different ideas. During the 50s and 60s, they kind of lost ideas, and they went into the electromechanical system you see with the lady with the red hair. But as video games started to come back in, they were like, oh, hey, we can do the flash thing again. And the game you see with the werewolf and the shotguns, that's an actual shooting game. And in all honesty, the display itself is more fascinating than the game that you would actually play there. That was kind of a disappointment, if I were to be honest. But you pull the trigger, and for just a moment, everything turns like a certain color, and whatever is blue or a certain color it tells the gun, which now has a more accurate photoreceptor, that, oh, this is it. And they got a little more accurate, and they started to change around. By the time you had Virtua Cop, you would pull the trigger and it would have like a special number or a special system showing. So you're not only shooting, that guy, you're shooting his hand, or you're shooting his arm, or you're shooting his crotch, which I admit to doing a couple times. And it was a system that was slowly built up. By the time you got to the Nintendo Wii, the camera, there was an actual camera on your controller. Before that point, all the consoles, you would actually have to buy separate guns for each game because the setup was different and the gun was different. And that was really annoying. If you want to play specific PlayStation games, you're going to have to buy a gun for each one. That's really annoying. Eventually, we get to modern times, and this is a game called Space Invaders. It's a really fun game. I tried it out last year, and it's the same concept. I don't actually know how it's working. If I were being honest, I think it might actually be the shooter where, you're just positioning it and that's it. Or, it might be light receptors because those are LED lights and they would show up correctly. They would give off an infrared light, but I don't know. But it's a great, great, great shooting game. Absolutely fantastic. Had a line of like 30, 40 people all the time. It actually blocked people's paths. But it was a fantastic game. And so you can sort of see this shooting as it moves forward into modern times. And that's where you find a lot of the modern games kind of following this path, going, okay, how do we place ourselves? Are we going to use the Wii method? Are we going to use the placement method? Are we going to use the pellet method? Oh, and the one to the far left that's supposed to show the Sebring idea, that's actually a modern setup that's at a Cabela's in Phoenix. I was like, oh my gosh, it's the old school thing, only they've got it way more advanced. So I was really cool. I was really impressed, so I had to take a picture of it. Oh, speaking of which, everything you see here, that's from my camera. The one on the far left, that was a iPod Touch camera, and most of the rest are from like an iPhone. So now you know. Yay. But shooting was really important in arcades and in video games. It's just, they're their own separate thing. It's not the graphics that improve, it's how the gun shoots and what the graphics can do to make the gun and the shooting better. Some of the side ones I thought were amazing. I would have loved a silent scope for the Wii U. Serious, that would have been so cool. Silent scope is a shooting game, but you also have a screen inside of the scope, and you look in there and you can see, the characters close up. It's just this nice little add-on, but it's perfect for what you want. And so, kind of this cool concept. But shooting in and of itself, it's just, you can see this slow moving forward, and the people designing it choosing out, okay, which one are we going to use? And each one is still being used today and is still considered fun. The next one I don't have any pictures of, simply because if I type in Japanese motion games, I get the Wii, or I get the PlayStation, or I get the Xbox, or something like that. I can't get those $20 junk games from Japan. I really did look for them, and there's so many of them. What they're basically doing is, I've got a couple of games like this. I don't have them. Like, a friend of mine has them, and we would play this all the time at a buddy's house. And the ping pong game was literally just two infrared lights on each side of the paddle, or on one side of the on one infrared, one light on one side of the panel, one light on the other side, and then this little receptor. And so if you moved, it showed that you swung, and that was all you really needed to swing. And the ball was moving on its own and stuff. And we discovered that if you just kind of shook the controller as hard as you could, You would have this guy who was just constantly swinging, and you could actually play really well, and it annoyed everybody. But this was way before the Wii, and it really did influence the Wii because, you had the little camera, you had the infrared light, you had everything set up, and they are some fun games. You have these little shooting games, you have, I think, a violin and a guitar game, and they're about $20. They're not expensive, they're not considered great, but they are incredibly important when we're talking about, what influenced the Wii or what influenced, modern gaming. You look at those games. And yes, Nintendo moved things around, but they were also inspired. I mean, I played a freaking ping pong game, and when I picked up the Wiimote and started to play tennis, I was like, oh, it's that ping pong game, isn't it? And then when they came out with the Wii Motion Plus, sure enough, they had a ping pong game. And I was just like, yeah, I can see where this is from. But I can't show you any pictures because they're Google America doesn't believe they exist. That's the best way I could say it. If you have some pictures or some videos of this stuff, I would love to see them again. All my buddies who have it, I can't get a hold of them, and it's sort of driving me nuts because I'm like, oh my gosh, those were so cool, and I'd love to show it to you, but I don't have them. It's really annoying. However, if you can find them, or if you do look them up, you'll just instantly see, like, okay, yeah, these were important. This was a special era, but it was only Japanese games. You couldn't find this in Europe, as far as I can tell. And if you found it in America, it was because you imported it from Japan. So it's a pretty special thing. So you should go looking for it and send me pictures, because I totally want pictures. Finally, for the modern arcade system, there was a game I simply forgot to add. I didn't forget to add. I couldn't add because I couldn't remember the name of the game. I played this one back in the day when it first came out in the arcade at a place called Pojo's. It's in Boise. It used to be this really, really nice arcade, and it used to run it used to be in every major mall wherever you went, but it's not as big anymore. But this game was at their really big Pojo's. And you basically sat down. That weird little thing in the middle of that picture is a chair. That's not a weird monster that wants to bite you, or a motorbike top. You can see the controls pretty well. You control where you're aiming and how you're moving with the right stick, and you move forward and reverse with the left stick. Simple enough. But it was one of the first major mech controls. Did you hear that? Did you hear my dog? She's looking at me now. She's like, oh, we should go outside. I want pets. But this game, heavily influential. You can see how it influenced, the Japanese game Virtual On and all these other games. Just look at it and you're like, yeah, there it is. The game that was before it was actually an F-15 game. And surprisingly enough, these games came from a company called Microprose. It's an American company. And they were really trying to show off, the new graphical systems. And they had one of the first graphical systems set up for gaming. And it was for arcades. So they were really showing this off and showing off how cool it was. This was the era of Virtua Fighter, and, N64 hadn't come out yet. So 3D was just this brand new thing. Polygons were brand new. So you can see that from that era, that idea and how it was influential. And I totally wanted to add it, but I couldn't remember the name of the game. You can see why, though. I mean, Battle of the Solar System, how on earth would I remember that? I remember the game, I remember playing it, I remember enjoying it, I remember finding this game a couple times online, but the name itself is just weird. I thought it was a MechWarrior game. That's what I thought when I played it. I was like, oh, MechWarrior, yeah. Love this series. Oh, the good old Battletech series, yeah. but it's not. They couldn't get the rights. But Microprose was a major influencer, even though they didn't last very long. They created a specific era of games, and you can just see their influence in all sorts of controls. If you look, you can almost see, the controls for Steel Battalion right there. It's missing a bunch of buttons, but it's there. It's right there in front of you. And that's pretty cool, don't you think? Okay, so the next video will be about more game controls, game control ideas I wish would happen, game controls that were important, and I forgot to add them on, and other stuff like that. But that's going to happen Friday or Saturday. I'm probably going to have to do it Friday because I've got a friend coming over, and she likes to take up a lot of my time. An old high school buddy. And, just see how everything is doing with her. And that's pretty much the video. So if you find more about that one game type, please give me more information. I would love to see it. And catch you all later.